Welcome back to another episode of the Can Man Radio Show. Today again, Weirsdale is our location because, hell, that's my studio now. And I'm just very fortunate to have it in this new awesome equipment again, as we talked about earlier, the BSW, the Roadcaster Pro, and all the fantastic stuff that comes along with being able to professionally broadcast some great content for you. And today's guest, well, he's probably not going to need much of an introduction for most of you in the professional fire service. He's got over 42 years leading and charging and pushing forward as a chief, a deputy chief, as a chief paramedic with the St. Louis Fire Department. He is a published author. One of the coolest books coming out here soon. If you haven't read it yet, it'll be out soon. It's Fully Involved Leadership. And Chief Gary Ludwig is our guest today. And you know, Chief, I want to bring you on and thank you first and foremost for taking the time to come in and spend with us this morning on a busy Sunday for you.
Not a problem. It's an honor to be here.
Well, you know, definitely an honor. I mean, you are not just a published author, but think about this for a second. You have probably scripted 20 years worth of articles for Firehouse Magazine. And many of us have read those articles, and they go from your experiences to your leadership experiences and much more, I imagine. I mean, what brought you to this point over the course of your career?
I don't know. I like to say I've been blessed. God has blessed me in many ways with my career. And you know, it started with St. Louis, just that blessing of being hired 2 months out of high school to be hired by St. Louis, and then to spend 25 years there working in a busy metropolitan system, retiring as the chief paramedic from St. Louis, and then being recruited a second time to work 10 years as a deputy fire chief in Memphis, another huge, large system there with 57 stations and 1,800 plus firefighters, and have a second opportunity to work in a large metropolitan area. And then God has blessed me again, where I find myself currently as a fire chief here in Champaign, Illinois, working with many outstanding professionals here also.
And you're a St. Louis boy by birth originally, are you not?
South St. Louis, born and raised.
Oh,
yeah.
my goodness. So Champaign is not that far from where essentially you grew up in Western Illinois, where you sit right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm about 3 hour door to door from, I still have a home down there in St. Louis. And so about 3 hours door to door.
On top of the lake house that you just constructed, which, you know, by listening to you, for all intents and purposes, sounds like the perfect retirement home where I need to be.
Yeah, I think that's where, I think that home that my wife and I just built will be where we'll be until our expiration date, as I like to say. And I know you live in a lake home also. And so lake living is just beautiful.
Well, I'll definitely have to send you pictures of the lake life from my perspective. I mean, like I said, it's sunny, it's humid, and it's beautiful out here in sunny Central Florida right now. And I can only imagine what it's like up there. I mean, living on the lake life in St. Louis, what's it like weather-wise right now? What are you looking at temperature-wise?
I think we're about 50 degrees, and it's just a slight overcast. We just had a pretty good rain soaker come through here the last couple of days, left anywhere from 1 to 3 inches, which is going to help the May flowers.
Oh, absolutely.
And I hope my guy that cuts my grass, it'll pay his bills well, because he'll have to come multiple times. But that's where we're currently at. So I'm always jealous of the Florida life. Have many good friends and associates down in Florida. I visit there often. And I was just there, I think, in November over in the Tampa side. And I love those West Coast sunsets off that Gulf. And
you know,
there's nothing more relaxing.
It's funny, as a Midwesterner as well, I got to tell you, the Tampa area, or Tampa, if you want to go by the new Tom Brady standard, or the Gronk standard, whatever you want to call it now, you know, a lot of people from the Midwest actually retire to the Tampa Clearwater area. And my grandparents, who were from Schaumburg, greater Chicago area, they did the same thing. They retired to Clearwater, and I fell in love with that area. It's just so peaceful, relaxing, and the Gulf of Mexico is just a far greater body of water. You know, no questions about it as far as just the scenery, the clarity in some areas, and then, of course, the dolphins you get to see, which you don't see on the East Coast very often.
No, not at all. And I agree, man. Those West Coast on Florida, those sunsets, they down in the Keys, and you just mentioned Clearwater. That's where I was in Clearwater. And then in October or September, before that I was in Greater Naples, Florida, down in the Fort Myers area with the Greater Naples Fire Department down there. My good friend Kingman Schultz, who's the chief down there. Mm-hmm. Again, beautiful sunsets, and it's just, I know my lake is nice, and we have I face west, so we have some nice sunsets there, but I like swimming in my lake. I don't have to worry about alligators. Let's put it that way. So.
Yeah, that's the only downfall to swimming in a body of water in Florida, whether it's a pool, a lake, or a canal. You're always going to have to worry about the bitey things like the alligators and the snakes. So, we make do, though. I mean, growing up in Florida, I've swam in my fair share of canals and lakes and boogie boarded and all those different things in the ocean with the sharks. And I've been very fortunate, I guess. But up north, it's a totally different environment. I mean, you have less things to harm you in those bodies of water. You could just really enjoy them. But one thing, if you get the opportunity the next time you're down here, is go visit one of the springs if you haven't already. Just the clearest, most purest body of waters that you'll ever find. And just the fact that they're ice cold to perfection, it takes a few minutes to warm up to it. But once you're in, the swimming is phenomenal. It's like you're looking down at the bottom, but you just don't have, there's no depth perception just because of the clarity of the water itself. That's how beautiful it is. That's Florida natural right there. So, I mean, there's something to look forward to the next time you get down here.
Well, I am a certified diver, so
Oh, me too. That's awesome.
all right. So and so I've dove in those cenotes in Mexico, which is
Okay.
again. So I know what you're talking about with the clarity.
Oh,
And of
yeah.
course, when you dive down south of you all down there in the Bahamas and down in the Caribbean, it's amazing. Western Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean, it doesn't matter. It's amazing how you get 200, 250 feet visibility.
Oh, yeah.
At even at 90 feet or so. So it's just absolutely amazing. So.
Well, the deepest I've gone is right at about 100 feet. And that's how I was able to get my advanced open water. This was probably over a decade ago. And I'll tell you, it was great. Got a little freaky at one point. I think I might have had a little nitrogen narcosis at one point. And the spring we were in, it was just very dark when we hit that lower depth. And we actually made it to an air bell. And it took me a second to reset. But once I did, I realized there was nothing to fear. So we revisited that depth again and did it like a champion at that point. And it's probably been a good 5, 6, 7 years since I've been in the water. And all my friends are now starting to take up diving. And here comes COVID. And now everything's changed. And our society has taken us away from being able to enjoy the outdoors. So I'm hoping that we can return to some normalcy because I'd really like to get back in the water and dive once again.
Yeah, I'm looking up a book as we speak. When you're talking about nitrogen narcosis, I just finished a great book and it talked about a submarine off the East Coast that they were trying to get to. And I was shocked. It was called Shadow Divers.
Shadow divers.
Oh,
Okay.
talks about them they found a U-boat submarine off the East Coast they didn't know was there.
Uh-huh.
I forget what what the depth was, but I think they lost 2 or 3 divers from nitrogen narcosis.
Oh, no.
So it's a great book, and it's by a master diver that's used to doing those underwater wreck diving sort of things. I forget what his name is, but I recommend the book highly. Very entertaining.
Well, there you go. And again, back to your books, you were talking earlier about fully involved leadership, and just give me a brief synopsis of what brought you to write this book. I mean, you are a leader, you are a consultant, you are a published author in many aspects of the fire service, not just in the Firehouse magazine realm, but I mean, you're a speaker. You are just in so many ways accomplished. And why leadership? What brought you to that point?
Well, leadership is something that I truly enjoy because I want to make things better. I
Okay.
want to improve things. I don't want to be in a passive way, just sitting there and watching things happen without having some input into it to make it better. And so the only way you can do that is through leadership. You have to be, as they say, one of my mentors, Jim Page, said, decisions are made by those that show up. And so the only way you can really truly show up and be a part of something to affect change for the better is to be in a leadership position, whether it's mentoring somebody or whether it is actually improving the system that you're working within or changing something within the system that you're in. So as president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, where I find myself right now during this COVID-19 process, that's an opportunity for me to be in a position to, as I say, lead, educate, and serve, which is our motto at the IFC in this crucial time, is that be able to make a difference.
And we are in a definite time of sorrow and fear, and it's crucial in the aspect that we, as the first responder community, have now become more victims than actual responders in some cases because of the lack of PPE that exists out there. Putting a face to it, we've lost 6 brothers in the organization and many more brothers and sisters out there there from the volunteer and EMS field, over 10,500 firefighters that are currently, looking at isolation or diagnosis. And it just seems like the numbers are going up. And what really concerns me is, where did we lose our perspective as a service of preparedness? Where did we go wrong, or what is not being done or said, and what can we do better? Because I know right now you're leading the charge with the IAFC to help bring critically needed PPE to responders across this nation. I've read your letters; they are impactful. They resonate with me, to the president, to the Congress. Let's talk about that for a second. So, what are we facing right now from your perspective, and where can we change? What do we need to do to change?
Well, one, sometimes the impact of whatever is happening is beyond our scope. We're always prepared for the local emergencies in our communities, but sometimes we ask for help from the federal government. And that's what they should be there for. Whether it's a hurricane in Florida,
Hmm.
where you need USAR teams or other types of resources, or whether it's this pandemic. And so most of us were prepared for the local emergency or even the regional catastrophe that may happen,
Hmm.
but it's these national disasters where we ask for the federal government help. And it appears as though the Strategic National Stockpile was not prepared for this.
Okay.
And some of the things I have said in my phone conversations with the White House and people from Congress, the National Governors Association, that I've been also working with to try to get PPE to our first responders at the state level,
Hmm.
is that at some point we have to have a reckoning in this country. And that is that these crucial supplies that are made overseas, that we're dependent upon with other countries, such as China, Malaysia, whether it's drugs or PPE, they need to be brought back onto our shores and manufactured here. That we have control of that. We wouldn't make our missile bombs and our tanks overseas during the middle of a war and be dependent upon some other country.
Not at
And
all.
so, and so why do we manufacture these weapons of war overseas and rely on other countries? And so this chain supply that we see ourselves in
Hmm.
is challenged. And so that's why the National Production Act should have been really fully implemented, where we're making stuff on our shores. Um, the prioritization not only needs to be our healthcare workers, but also our firefighters and our paramedics. And that's where I've been fighting at, because the states have been changing. Some of the states have been changing the prioritization of our firefighters
Hmm.
and healthcare workers. I talked to a fire chief in Florida, ironically, since you're in Florida, and they had a conversation with a state health official who directly told them on the phone that you are not the priority, that the healthcare workers and the people who are doing home health care, the health departments, they are the priority. And that was their attitude. And that's why it's so important that we're working with the National Governors Association to say, no, this can't happen. We have to protect our firefighters and our paramedics. They are the warriors, as I like to say, on the tip of the spear in
Hmm.
this battle.
And you have said it eloquently in many occasions, or on many occasions rather. We are the tip of the spear. And how can you rate us any less important than, the home healthcare providers, or even the providers in the hospital? Sure, I get it. They're going to be overrun potentially by patients that have COVID or suspicious for COVID. But it's kind of funny. That's not exactly the case across most of the country. If you look at hospitals in general, except for the hot spots, you're not seeing a significant increase or uptick in patient counts as far as it goes. In fact, my understanding is you're seeing hospitals, conduct furloughs or layoffs of certain key, elements like nursing staff and doctors and, internists and so on and so forth. So if the messaging is going to be that they take priority, how come it's us that takes the back seat when we're the first response, the first responders who require this PPE, who are going to be the first in contact 100% of the time before they even set foot into a hospital? And it makes me sick to hear that an actual health official, and from my state nonetheless, would actually imply that we're any less important than a home healthcare provider. While their job is important, we are the ones that respond 24/7, no questions asked, without hesitation, and step up as we are designed to do in our DNA.
Roger that. And I know as of last week that Florida has received, and I have all these numbers from other states also,
Sure.
2.9 million N95 masks. And this fire chief that I talked to which is in Southwest Florida.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a good sized department, 15, 16 stations. I think it's 16 stations.
Mm-hmm.
He's received 40 of those, 40,
40.
40 out of 2.9 million that have been delivered to the state through the Strategic National Stockpile. Now, I was on a phone conference with the FEMA administrator last week, which is Pete Gaynor,
Mm-hmm.
and I point blank asked him, do you consider firefighters and paramedics the same priority as healthcare workers? And his answer was emphatically yes. I said, well, we got a problem then, because what you're handing out to your states is not getting to us. And so one of the things I said to him is that just like the highway departments, the Department of Transportation, they give highway funding, federal funding to states for the interstates.
Yeah,
And there's conditions attached to that. If you're going to accept this federal funding, these are X, Y, and Z that you have to do A, B, and C, and X, Y, and Z.
absolutely.
So I say the same thing with federal funding from FEMA, that if you're going to accept federal funding, strategic national stockpile equipment from the federal government, these are the conditions. And one of those conditions should be that firefighters and paramedics are the priority, when it's same priority as anybody else when it comes to PPE.
Well, if you're going to treat the highway system as a critical component of the infrastructure for the supply chain, then you better treat the first responders as a critical component of the infrastructure for the supply chain of protection and service. Because when you cripple the services in general, I mean, I've never seen in my days, in 20 years of being in this profession, a contingency plan should we have X amount of members out because they're either in isolation or, God forbid, they contracted COVID, and we then, depress our ability to respond or suppress it rather. We're talking about the potential to brown out stations, reorganize service levels, diminish ALS service to BLS service. And that's not just my department. There are departments across this country that are putting those levels of contingency plans in place. And it's all because we are running out and finding it increasingly more difficult to just get a simple mask, a mask that can protect us from being exposed beyond, okay, this COVID virus, this coronavirus that we're dealing with now. And that's one of the biggest and most significant concerns I have. Seeing my responders, my crew, we're alternating people going in and out of houses that are suspicious. We don't want to expose too many people. And we're also throwing surgical masks over our N95s to keep them intact as best we can. I mean, it seems like we're doing the best we can, but obviously we could be doing better.
Yeah, I agree. And that's where our federal partners and our state partners need to step up. What we're experiencing is beyond our capabilities and beyond our scope. It's no different than if you were to have a hurricane or earthquake in Florida or some other state. You're going to need federal resources to come in and help you. They are not, the first responders, but they are the supplement to us. They're not usually there to run the show, but they are there to provide the resources that we need. And so that is why it's so critically important that the federal and the states be prepared and equate and treat us the same priority as others.
Well, and that being said, you would think that we'd learn from the lessons of Katrina, Andrew, 9/11, let me see, Ivan, hitting the panhandle in Florida.
Wilma, the list goes on. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we always learn something.
Rita, Hurricane
Oh
Rita.
gosh, yes. I mean, in our lifetime, we've seen tragic, catastrophic natural disasters occur. Why is this any less important? I mean, we should have listened from our previous, or not listened, but we should have taken something. And I feel we have, but it seems like with every pandemic disaster, whether it's natural, man-made, there's always mistakes being made and something to be learned from. So what do you think we can learn from this point forward? What are we going to do to move forward? Because Corona is not going away. And it's only going to evolve and potentially come back different, if not worse, and have a greater impact down the road.
Well, I fear, because I'm an avid reader, and several years ago I read the book The Great Influenza. It's a great book that talks about the 1918 world pandemic that occurred with the Spanish flu. And so I had to pull that back out and read it again. And it's, oh my God, we're repeating some of the same mistakes that we did in 1918.
Right.
And so hopefully we learn from this, because what happened in 1918, and I fear, and I hope it doesn't happen here, is that the virus mutated. And actually the second wave of the virus was the most deadliest in 1918. And so that's what I fear here before we can get a vaccine. And even if you do get a vaccine, it's going to mutate. And so that's we need to start preparing now. there are the different phases. There's mitigation,
Hmm.
preparedness, the
Hmm.
response itself, and then the recovery.
Yep.
And we can't just start at the response phase.
Well, and we can't become complacent either as we start to reopen our nation, because once we start to lay down our arms or our awareness, then that's where we're going to find the resurgence, like you said, with the influenza of 1918, the Spanish flu. There is going to be a potential greater impact. And so we obviously need to know that as we open the states, as we start moving forward with life, as hard as it is for me to say this, life has changed for us as we know it, for the unforeseeable future. And there's no telling when we'll have a vaccination, when things will start to level off. I mean, it takes time, obviously. I mean, I'm grateful we have better technology, stronger medicine practices, more resources, more access to resources, in the sense of, being able to provide greater access to these types of medications that are going to be out there or created, but it's still not in the foreseeable future, at least to my understanding.
No, and I agree, and thankfully we do have a better understanding of science and medicine than we did 100 years ago in 1918 through 1920, and but it's still viruses have been around since the forever, and
Hmm.
you go back in that book I talked about, they kind of lay out some of the history of going back to 13th, 14th, 15th century with the bubonic plague, the black plague, and those sort
Sure.
of things,
Sure.
and that's actually where bloodletting came, believe it or not, is that they knew there was something in the blood that was causing these viruses or causing these problems. So naturally, the natural common thinking was, well, if we let the blood out, we'll let the virus out.
I mean, it
And
makes sense back then, right?
it made sense to those people. And so I'm sure some of the things that we're doing today, if we have another pandemic 100 years or 200 years from now, they'll look back on what we did, try to learn, but then think some of the things that we might have done were barbaric in a way.
So, not just masks themselves, but putting this in perspective of PPE in general, what are we most in need of? What are we missing the mark on that we could definitely do better on? And I say this because think about the industries that have shifted production. We're talking about auto industry and various others that have now become, the facilitators for creating ventilators, right? So now we've utilized them and their resources to go ahead and get these ventilators built and out into the system. What can we be doing? What could we be doing as a nation, as industry, to help better prepare us or help us get what we need? And what is it that we need more specifically?
Well, in my opinion, it's kind of what I talked about before, is that Congress at some point, we have to have a reckoning and a serious conversation in this country that, yeah, it might be cheaper to make stuff in Malaysia, in China,
Hmm.
and that's what the companies are making their profit at because they're paying somebody 47 cents an hour or whatever it is to make them N95 masks. But again, we wouldn't make our bullets, our guns, and our tanks overseas.
Not at all.
So and be relying on some country to cut us off. So why are we making these weapons of this war, this coronavirus war overseas? And so I think that's one thing we need to be doing is start producing our products like this on our soil.
Hmm.
That National Production Act, that should have been, I look back at World War II when my parents, were actually, my dad fought in the South Pacific in World War II. Overnight companies started producing tanks and jeeps and weapons of rifles, belt bucklers.
Sure.
If you ever go back and look what this country produced during World War II, it is phenomenal. I think there was over 200,000 planes that were produced in a 4-year period, let alone all the bullets and the tanks and the jeeps and the helmets and all the other things that we have to ramp up our industry here in the United States, that when these things happen, that we are ready to tackle with that we can switch our companies here from making bed cloths or mypillows.com or whatever the case might be to
Sure.
making masks.
Sure.
And that's what we need to be able to do.
And let's not.
Because a local fire department can't do it by themselves.
No, and let's not forget, the funding mechanisms that were in place back then as well with war bonds. And I'm not saying that's a route we have to take, obviously, as a nation to provide, the funding mechanisms for the PPE that we require. But I mean, there's got to be a means and a way. And if it means bringing production back, and this is something that concerned me as well, talking to Mark Treglio the other day from the IAFF, mentioning that looking at some of the material, the quality of these masks coming over from China, Malaysia, and those countries, they don't meet the same standards that we require when it comes to providing protection. So it's almost imperative that we bring those standards back to this country and we start going into production efforts to provide the PPE out there, whether it's a mask, whether it's a gown, a face shield, a respirator of some sort. It's up to us as a nation to help rebuild not just our economy in a sense, but help rebuild the stockpile that we're going to desperately need here in the coming months and the coming years as we endure and continue down the road of Corona and COVID-19.
I agree that strategic national stockpile should have enough in it to get us through whatever that time period is, 1 month, whatever the burn rate is, 1 month, 2 months, whatever, before we can ramp up production here in the United States. And so you're absolutely right, because as IFC president, I have actually implemented 3 different task forces that are working on different things. And one is our COVID-19 operational task force. And there's a lady on there by the name of Dr. Christina Baxter, that her expertise is looking at these N95 masks and these other things. And she is looking at what is coming out of China and Malaysia and some of those other Southeast Asia countries. And she is saying, this is just phenomenal what she is saying, or just incomprehensible, whatever term you want to use, that over 90% of what's coming out of there are fake.
Yeah.
Is fake. And so when we hear about equipment being seized by Miami-Dade and other things like that, I haven't been able to, Pete Gaynor told me on the phone, the FEMA administrator, that they are not, FEMA is not seizing equipment or confiscating equipment. Now, what may be happening, and I haven't seen whatever happened out of Miami-Dade.
Okay.
But he did say the Department of Justice has a task force that is seizing fake equipment.
So go ahead.
So that may have what been happening in Miami-Dade. I'm not sure. I haven't seen any follow-up stories on that, but he said that's the only thing. So when you hear these stories about equipment being seized by the feds, he said that may very well be the Department of Justice seizing fake equipment.
See, that answers my next question, because we were talking about this the other night as well in my interview with Mark, and I asked where did these 1 million masks go? What could have possessed the Fed to say, nope, we're going to take this PPE away and we're going to go ahead and just claim it for ourselves or redistribute it across the country? But that's a very plausible thought process there, where maybe we were getting fraudulent materials or fake materials, and so the Fed caught onto it through their task force and said, nope, we have to take the hit on this. We're going to have to pull them from the stockpile and find a way to provide with better equipment, safer equipment, which by the end of the day is what we're going to need to win this war, or at least to get ahead of this battle.
Well, and some of these places in China have become very good at creating fake PPE. And so we, the IFC did a webinar. We do one every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I can't remember, it was the last one, the one before that Dr. Baxter actually had slides on there showing how to detect fake N95 masks. And even if there's like a C and an O and how close it's together. And she had it all down. Wow. And it is amazing how much fake stuff is coming out of there, that we think we're protecting our firefighters and our paramedics, and it turns out there's fake stuff. Actually, some leaked into the FEMA stockpile and got distributed in Missouri. Before they distributed out to all the fire departments and healthcare workers in Missouri, and they had to actually recall that because they found out they were fake. So we got to be careful with that, because we think we're protected. We think, it's no different than going in with a fake SCBA into a near zero visibility environment, and finding out once you get inside, my God, you're going to know that you're breathing some smoke in because it's a fake SB, or a fake a face mask or a fake regulator or a fake tank on your back. But in this case, we can't see the enemy. It's a virus.
Yeah.
So you think you're protected wearing this N95, and you're wearing a fake mask, and it's not getting all those microns. It's supposed to narrow down to 0.1 microns to be able to filter that stuff out. And that's our worries. So that might be some of the things that I've spent about an hour on the phone with the FEMA administrator on Wednesday. And those are some of the takeaways that I learned when I spoke with him.
Excellent. Well, I know that you have a million things going on, and I want to take a moment again to thank you for coming on the show today and sharing your perspective, what the IAFC is doing, you as their head, as their leader, their president, and the efforts you're putting out there. You're putting a face to this from the leadership side. You're stepping up and hitting Congress head on, the president of this United States, and all of the management teams, FEMA, and so on. And you're telling them it's time. It's time to start fixing this for everybody. So
before we cut off, I got to talk about one more thing.
By all means, Chief. By all means.
So yes, I have written a letter to the president and the Congress. I'm asking for $5 billion to be put into SAFER.
Okay.
$5 billion to be put into AFG. Those are just some of what we're going to need. Those are not wants, as I tell them. Those are needs that we have in the fire service. I'm asking them to fund those in the next stimulus bill. And so we're doing what we can right now to educate Congress on our needs.
Yep.
There's a lot of noise up on Capitol Hill. But I will tell you, at some point, I'm going to do a call to arms.
Okay.
I'm going to ask every firefighter in this country, whether you're volunteer or whatever you are, to call your representatives in Congress when we get some language in the bill that this is a need, not a want. And we want them to call their representatives, to call their offices, write them letters, whatever we have to do to tell them this is what we need for the fire service. We need to be heard on Capitol Hill. And so that call is going to be coming soon. I'm not sure exactly when. We're waiting for it to see where the language is that comes out of the stimulus bill. But I encourage every firefighter. I don't care what patch you have. I don't care you're paid or not paid. We need to talk to our representatives and get this funding that we need.
Amen, Chief. And that's exactly what I was looking for the closing. And I'm glad that you jumped in and threw that in there, because it was going to be, what do you think we can do next and where are you heading? So phenomenal. Thank you. And is there a website or anything you want to share through the IAFC that members or just firefighters in general can go to and research more about COVID and the efforts of the IAFC?
Sure. So it's IAFC.org. And that landing page will take you to all our resources that we have for COVID-19, which we have impact dashboards. We got one right now looking at the economic impact. We've had about 1% of the fire departments respond to that so far. That looks right now, I checked this morning, it's over $400 million in economic impact to those departments of lost revenue that they're seeing. If you were to parlay that out to all the fire departments in this country, whether they're volunteer, combination, or paid, we're probably looking at about a $40 billion loss in revenue to those departments that we need. You know, I'm already hearing stories of firefighters that have been told that you're going to be laid off. I know some cities, or small communities, I should say, that have very little tax revenue coming in that already have laid off firefighters.
Yes.
I talked to one chief out of 195 on his staff of firefighters. They're talking about laying off 36. The list goes on. So it's not going to be the economic fallout of what we're seeing right now, but what I fear is coming, the avalanche and the tsunami of layoffs that are coming in our profession. And we need to have a ready response force for the next local community emergency, whether it's a regional catastrophe or even an economic national disaster such as this.
Well, then let's get on it. Let's stay informed and let's be prepared, because it's more than just the virus itself, no doubt, and the financial impact and what could come after this. And so with that being said, again, Chief, thank you. And, you know, with all the interviews you've done, I look forward to seeing you again on the big screen and putting the message out there. Thank you for all you do, Chief Gary Ludwig. And if there's anything down the road we can ever do, get you back on the show, it would be a tremendous honor to share your words, your voice, your mission with the Can Man Radio Show and the network out there. So thank you again. Listen, guys, as always, I want you guys to remember it's important to be your brother's, your sister's keeper. Always keep your head on a swivel. Remember to be a good mentor, be a good leader. Never be afraid to fail. And never be afraid to make a decision, right, wrong, or indifferent, because you know what? Indecisiveness is usually the greater evil of the two. So if you simply just embrace what you have and the gift given to you, you'll push ahead. So that being said, God bless. We'll catch you on the flip side. Hey, guys. And if you're looking for other great content out there, then check out some of my friends, starting with my good friend Steve Green from the 5 Alarm Task Force, and then my buddy Rob Polick out of Passaic with Flow and Vent. Then moved down to the Down to Fight Fire podcast out of British Columbia, looking at SA Matters, situational awareness, that is, with Dr. Richard Gassaway, the Jump Seat Radio Nation, my brother, and the Jump Seat Radio podcast with Captain Ryan Pennington, talking about Pin the Q, Code 3, Do Work, the Thin Red Line podcast with my brother, out of Passaic as well, Captain John Hayawick, the Fire Rescue Show, The Average Jake Firefighter, and John Spira's Fit to Fight Fire podcast. Go check these brothers out. I know they'll appreciate you stepping up and listening. They'll always be there for you. Take care.